It's that time of the year again where the Pokemon TCG players complain about stuff. It's a common thing at this point, you know, the format's stale, this deck is too powerful, this card's too powerful, this card's too broken, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video, because ever since the Atlanta Regional, Budew has been brought up again, because if you watch the live streams, it was literally just itchy pollen, back and forth between the two players, and it was, to be honest, incredibly dull to watch. It was basically whoever used Itchy Pollen the most won the match, and also the feature matches themselves was literally just Gardevoir versus Dragapult or Dragapult versus Dragapult. The format at the moment is pretty stale. But one thing that's been popping up recently is people want Budew banned, and this kind of happens a lot, you know, people wish stuff to be banned all the time. It happened not too long ago when Dust Noir came out, people were hoping that that card would get banned, and now everyone's forgotten about it. And now Budew has come up because, like, I guess Budew is a bit of a more problematic card because its effect is a lot more powerful, basically locking you out of an entire aspect of the game, that being able to play item cards, which are very important cards in some decks, and just very important cards in general. People are saying it should be banned, people are saying it's a skill issue, which is just, like, what do you mean it's a skill issue? Like, getting locked out of item cards, how's that a skill issue? I don't understand the people who are saying that type of stuff. But some people are saying it should be banned, some people are saying it should not be banned, all this kind of stuff, and I'm gonna basically just talk about history of item lock cards, I guess, and like how those cards actually have not been banned unless it's in expanded, and how those cards are differentiated from, you know, Budew in general, because Budew, it does have a strong ability, but it's very, very weak compared to other item locks we've had in the past. I'd also like to say I ran a poll on my YouTube, and an overwhelming majority of people said no, Budew shouldn't be banned. And the reason why I see a lot of people saying Budew shouldn't be banned is because it helps slow down the game, because we're in a pretty fast format. Well, we were in a pretty fast format, but pre-rotation, you know, there were a lot of decks that could just do a lot of stuff very, very quickly, get themselves set up very, very quickly, and Budew just helped to slow that down. It helped to bring some of the top decks down to a very low type of power level. Like Regidrago, as soon as Budew came out, just dropped down because, you know, you can't E-switch, you can't do all this other kind of stuff, and it basically just grinded the deck to a halt, kind of, and then gave way for these other types of decks, like Dragapult, like Gardevoir and Goldengo, to basically, like, come up. The deck mainly sees the most amount of play in Dragapult, and Dragapult is currently the most represented deck in the format, 37%. It had how many top placings at Atlanta? I think it was like 70 something. In like at the top of the day 2 decks, it had like 70 places. It's like Atlanta, it had in what, the top, let's just say the top 32, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 places in the top 32. That's over half. So yeah, deck's pretty good, and the reason why it's good is because the deck has good mid-stage evolutions that not only gain you advantage, but pretty much like getting item locked is fine. You can item lock your opponent, slowly build up your board, and, you know, if you get item locked back, it doesn't really mean anything because you have a good mid-stage evolution with Dracloak that some people are saying should be the banned card, which is like, why? It's like, the card is literally comfy, but like better in a way. Now we're going to talk about basically other types of item locking cards and other types of cards that, like, previously in the game's history were pretty problematic because the game has gone through some very big changes over the years it's been, you know, out. Like back in the day, the format was probably like ridiculously fast, ridiculously broken with some of the cards that were around in the Sun and Moon era, and now the format is just very slow. It takes time to get going, it takes time to establish your board, and Budew, in all honesty, just brings that down to a grinding halt. Because like people are saying Budew is good because it helps slow down the game. We are currently in a very slow format because we've lost a ton of good cards from rotation, so now Budew just grinds the game to a halt, is mainly what people are saying. So by doing some research, I've found a couple of examples of item lock like cards that were pretty problematic during their time. But the reason why these item locks were problematic is because they had other cards alongside them that were also pretty broken. So we'll start off with the one that everyone kind of talks about when it comes to item locks, and that is Seismitoad EX. This card's Quaking Punch Attack did 30 damage for 2 colorless, and then you item lock your opponent. The energy requirement didn't really matter because we had stuff like double colorless in the format. But the reason why this deck and this card was so problematic for the format is because you had Garbotoxin Garbodor to go alongside it, which said as long as it has a tool card attached to it, no abilities for each player. So not only did you had Garbodor that was locking all abilities, but you also had Seismitoad locking you out of items, so you were not only locked out of abilities but also item cards. Plus Seismitoad, when compared to Budew, does a little bit more damage, but it's also a lot bulkier. It has, 180 HP and Budew has 30. So in that aspect, Budew is, easier to knock out. You can knock out Budew with a lot of different cards, but Seismitoad is pretty difficult to KO. It's weak to grass, and I'm not sure if there are any meta grass decks around that time in the X and Y era. There might have been, but 180 HP item lock Pokemon is pretty hard to get rid of. And you could just have another one on the bench, so when that one gets knocked out, you just bring up the next one and just keep doing it. But it's if you want to use abilities, you have to get rid of the Garbodor, in which case your opponent could just have another one because you could just have multiple on the bench. Same with Seismitoad. It's we don't really have any decks in the format that are playing just Budew. Why would you play this 30 HP item lock Pokemon in multiple copies when stuff like Dragapult exists? You can literally just knock out 3 of them. You can knock out one in the active and then knock out 2 on the bench unless they have, a HP boosting tool card, which is also something people are starting to do now, is put stuff like Bravery Charm and Luxurious Cape in the deck just to boost the HP of, Budew, so you can use it longer and so it can't be bench sniped more easily. But yeah, Seismitoad EX Garbodor was very, very annoying for the time from what I've heard, and that's the prime example when you bring up item lock formats that were really bad for the game. Next up, Trevenant. Trevenant, while it was in the active spot, your opponent can't use item cards, and this was before Seismitoad, I believe, and Trevenant was also pretty prevalent in the format. It also had Trevenant Break, which was basically, breaks were kind of weird. You basically put it on top of the Pokemon and it gives it an additional attack or an additional ability and all that kind of stuff. We haven't seen them since, and the Break Trevenant basically allowed you to put 30 damage on all of your opponent's Pokemon for, I think, a Psychic and a Colorless, so that's how you would basically take knockouts and do a bunch of damage, while Trevenant is item locking your opponent while it's in the active spot. That's another thing, so if you brought it out with something like a Lysander, you could, start playing the game. But we had Wally in the format. We said you could play it during your first turn and basically evolve a Pokemon, so you could evolve a Phantump straight into Trevenant on your first turn by just using Wally. So immediately you have your item lock established for basically your opponent's first turn, because you would go first, have Phantump, use Wally, evolve it into Trevenant, and now your opponent is item locked on their very first turn of the game, which is not very healthy, but this deck did see quite a bit of play, and it did do pretty well at events, but it didn't have a very high amount of representation, but it was a deck that people needed to be aware of. We also had cards like Omastar, which said as long as you have, I think it's as long as you have less Pokemon on your bench than your opponent, they're item locked, which it's sort of a niche amount of play in some decks, like a few tag team decks, like Mimikyu and Gengar, Reshizard and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of a bit of niche play, but it wasn't game breaking. Vileplume, Forest of Giant Plants. Now this one was broken because we had Forest of Giant Plants, which basically allowed you to evolve grass Pokemon on your first turn, as soon as it's into play, but basically ignoring the thing about needing to have a Pokemon in play for one turn, and you could do it multiple times. So if you had Oddish, Gloom, Vileplume, you could just go evolve Oddish into Gloom and then immediately into Vileplume, and Vileplume said, both players can't use item cards. So not only were you locking out your opponent, but you're also locking out yourself. But it didn't really matter because you could just use up all of your item cards and then put down a Vileplume, and then I'm guessing there was a card around the time that you could just use to pick it back up, play out your turn, and then put it back down, so now your opponent's locked. And yeah, that's basically how that deck went. And Forest of Giant Plants is a very, very broken card. We kind of have something similar to it in the format, being Great Tree, I think that's what it's called. But it's not nearly as good. And then we also had Vikavolt V, which saw a niche amount of play in stuff like Pika-Rom, because you could reduce its attack cost with the Prism Star Stadium or something like that. And then once Pika-Rom rotated, it kind of saw play as its own deck, but it didn't really do all that well. Plus, around this time, we didn't have in-person events because there was the whole virus thing going on. So it was mainly just limitless events and online tournaments. So there isn't really a lot of data to go off of. But yeah, just another item locking card that saw a small amount of play while it was legal, even if we didn't have in-person events at the time. Now back to the topic of this card being banned. Now Pokemon have banned cards in the past, but they were mainly for expanded, which, you know, allows you to use cards from base set black and white all the way up to our newest set. So obviously you have years and years and years and years worth of cards at your disposal, and you can make some pretty degenerate, pretty ridiculous decks that basically just stop your opponent from playing the entire game. So obviously they had to ban stuff in that format, but I believe cards have been banned in standard before. I hear people say cards have been banned in standard before, but I've been trying to find a list, but like I can't find anything about cards being banned in standard. But I can find a couple of videos of people talking about them, but I'm pretty sure they were only banned in standard in Japan, and if they were banned in standard in, you know, the West, it was only in sanctioned events. So Sneasel back in the Neo era was banned because you had Darkness Energy, which is different to the Darkness Energy we have now. It was technically a special energy that basically made it do more damage, and you could just do a bunch of damage, all that kind of stuff. Slowking, also from the Neo era, was banned because of a mistranslation that basically made it to where if your opponent played an item card or something like that, they had to flip a coin, and they basically had to flip it multiple times because it stacked, and it wasn't supposed to stack because it was only supposed to work when Slowking was in the active. Lysander's trump card, this basically just resets the whole game. I've heard this one was banned in standard, but again, I can't find any information about it. If anybody knows, then please let me know in the comments. I'm just going off of what I've heard and what I've read from a very small amount of articles. Miss Magius from the Sun and Moon era was banned because you had Darkstone or Duskstone, which allowed you to evolve it whenever, and you could basically knock itself out to draw a bunch of cards, and you would basically do it multiple times, put your opponent down to like 1 or 2 prizes, then use Reset Stamp to basically give them 2 cards in hand for their turn, basically their first turn of the game. And I heard that Bellaba and Bryson Man was banned. I'm not sure why. It says both players mill free, but then you can discard 3 other cards to force both players down to 3 bench spaces. But I've heard that this one was only banned in Japan from looking at research, but again, I don't really know. If anyone knows of any other cards that were banned in standard, please let me know, because I cannot find any information about this, and it might be a video topic that I want to talk about in the future. But yeah, people want Budew to be added to this list. Again, Pokemon technically don't ban cards in standard. It's very, very rare that they do, unless the card is incredibly problematic because of other cards in the format. And Budew really isn't one of those cards. Like, yeah, it's annoying to get item locked, but the card is like very easy to get rid of. It's what, 30 HP? That's it. Like, compared to other stuff like Seismitoad, which had 180, Trevenant, which probably had like 130, 150, something like that. Vileplume, again, it was a stage 2 evolution, it probably had like 100 and something. Vikavolt, I probably had 200 and something because it was a V Pokemon. It's like, yeah, people playing stuff like Bravery Charm and Luxurious Cape to give Budew more HP, so they can't easily be knocked out, and you can basically just keep item locking for multiple turns. And in some situations, yes, the card can be incredibly annoying because you basically if you're not drawing a supporter card or all you're drawing is item card, you're going to be locked out of the game for quite a long time. Should the card be banned? I personally like it, and I also don't like it. I don't think it promotes a very healthy game because you're basically just, you know, item locking each other back and forth. It's just like draw a pass in some instances, draw a pass in some instances. And if you're up against a deck that can, you know, utilize that to its advantage, something like Dragapult, which again people are saying is very problematic at the moment. As someone who's been playing Dragapult since Twilight Masquerade, even I'm getting sick of the deck. And it's like, at the moment, with the newest sets we've had released, like Journey Together, and we have Destined Rivals coming soon, there isn't really anything releasing that can shake up the meta, and I don't think it's Budew that's the problem. I think it's the main decks themselves that are the problem. Like, I think Dragapult is the problem with the format, not Budew. Like, if we took out Budew from the format, there would be so many more decks in the format. And if we took out Dragapult, the same thing would happen. Like, if we took out Dragapult from the format, there would be so many more decks in the format that would be able to compete. And if we took Budew out of the format, the exact same thing would happen. But it's just a case of, like, people just, you know, don't really like a card that basically stops you from playing the game. As someone who's been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for over 7 years, I'm very used to cards that lock me out of entire aspects of the game. Rivalry of Warlords, there can only be one. Skill Drain, Soul Drain, King Calamity, all that kind of stuff. I'm used to that. But the thing is that in other card games, there's ways to play around it. And in Pokemon, there are ways to play around it, but you kind of have to use item cards in order to play around it, unless you draw like, I don't know, a supporter that can kind of do something, or unless you're playing techs like Monkey Dory, which, you know, can very easily just knock it out, or, you know, you just knock it out, just attack it, is what many people are saying. Skill issue is what people are saying. I don't really agree with that. I just think that's a very copium cop-out answer. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Like, it's a topic that'll probably be discussed until the card eventually rotates, or until Pokemon, you know, actually ban it, which I probably don't think they'll do. Because these other cards, Seismitoad EX wasn't banned, Omastar wasn't banned, Vileplume wasn't banned, Vikavolt wasn't banned during the time, Trevenant wasn't banned during the time. All these other item lock cards never got banned. Some of them, I believe, got banned and expanded. I think Forest got banned and expanded. I'm not sure if Garbodor's banned. But none of these ever got banned in Standard. And because of that, Budew probably won't, because Budew is ultimately weaker than all of these other cards. Trevenant item locked and had a good attack, with help from the Break card. Seismitoad was bulky and did, you know, more damage. Vileplume had other cards to play alongside it, same with Seismitoad as well. And Vikavolt did decent amount of damage and item locked, whereas Budew does 10 damage, item lock on a 30 HP Pokemon. And I can't really think of much else to say for this. It's just something that's probably going to be discussed until the card eventually rotates, whenever that is, like 2 years time. I think it's part of the H block. So it'll be another 2 years until it rotates, because next year it'll be G, and then the year after that it'll be H. So we're going to have to stick with this card for 2 years unless they release something that can counter it, unless they start releasing more cards that can counter it. They've done it before with decks in the past that were, you know, problematic. Like, they've released a new Psyduck that basically says Pokemon that knock themselves out don't do that. So that's, you know, a good counter to stuff like Dusknoir. But yeah, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Do you think Budew should be banned? Do you think, you know, it's fine, it's like not all that powerful, people are, you know, fear-mongering a bit too much? Let me know. Because personally, I like it, but I also don't like it, but I genuinely don't think it'll be banned, because all these other item lock Pokemon, you know, weren't banned. But, you know, the format back then was a lot different to what it is now, so it's all up in the air at the moment, but Pokemon very rarely ban cards in Standard, so I don't think it'll be banned. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all of that nonsense, and I will see you in the next video, whatever that may be. Take care.